Alrighty, thank you, Dr. Partha, and we'll let people join as they come. We'll kick it off on time. I'll take the waiting off the meeting room so people can join. Um, all right, let's kick it off. I think there's an important topic. One of the key levers for us to track, manage, and also be mindful as a lever for us to use, and which could drive cost and the delivery as well. So definitely it's a critical topic under project management. So without much ado, welcome Dr. Partha again. Let's kick off the session on time management. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So, good afternoon, everyone. Once again, our Sunday appointment. Welcome, everyone. So, today we are going to do another very important part of project management competency, which is how to manage time. Now, remember, each of these modules I am actually covering with you all in half an hour session, but these are a full 1 month course. So about 16 hours of this course, so which I'm trying to cover. So I will give you just the gist of it, but there are much more which is there in the actual program. But this will be good enough for you to, uh, uh, do your project, because I'm going to teach you some tools and techniques today, how to do time management. So the first thing in the time management is to understand that this is a critical component of the project management plan. Now, when you make a plan, there are 10 elements, which is cost, scope, time, quality, HR. So you have the whole list with you. And we have to have a plan, which is how to manage time at the initiation stage, at the planning stage, how to manage time during execution, and how to manage time in terms of monitoring and controlling and all the changes, and finally how to manage time during the closing of the project. So 10 functions of the project manager plus the 5 life cycle or life stages of a project. Everywhere you need to apply your concepts and knowledge about time management. So there are very broadly 5 areas that you need to keep in mind while you're trying to manage time. The first one, you need to establish what should be the duration of the project. Now, some projects, when you bid for a project or when your boss or client or sponsor gives you the project, the duration is known to you. That means someone will tell you the next 6 months, I want this project to be completed. So therefore, you know that. But sometime you will be required to actually create a proposal. In that case, you will actually create your own proposal, and I'll show you how to do the scheduling. And in that case, you will be bidding for a project saying, this project will take me 5 years to do and so many $1 million. So you will be able to establish the duration. In any case, whether it's given to you or you are establishing, duration of the project is a critical component to establish. And in real life, it has to be watertight, because if you burst the timeline every day, it costs you money, because you will be hiring project managers, contractors, employees, consultants. So every day is important in terms of your accuracy of the duration. The second thing, what is important for you to establish, and that what we are going to do today, is do we know when to start and when to end, not the whole project, but all the component of the tasks within the project. So starting and finishing is a very, very critical part of time management. Okay, and there's a process for that. Then in the management, the milestone dates are very important, because you establish these are the dates which are milestone. When you achieve that, that means you have completed a phase, completed a very important task, so that you can report back to the the sponsors or the users. The next one is the critical path. You need to understand what is the critical path of various tasks in a project, because that critical path is the longest path that you will take to from start to finish. So I'm repeating, the critical path is the longest path of all the tasks that takes your project from start to finish. And therefore, because it's the longest path, there is no leeway, or in project management terminology, we call it float, or we call it slack. So there's no float available in the critical path. So if any component in the critical path, any task in the critical path gets extended, the whole project gets extended. So therefore, it is called critical path, the path to complete, but it's critical because there is no slack there. So that's a critical path. And how do you do all these? There is a tool called Gantt chart. I have shown you or asked you to practice uh, by going to the MS project. So in the MS project, you will be able to see, if you put all the tasks, some duration, start dates, sometime end dates, you will be able to see how a Gantt chart looks like. So Gantt chart and the calculation of time is very important. So this is an overview of the time management plan. So I'm quickly reviewing. At the end of this plan, you will know the duration of the project, the start date of the project, the end date of the project. You will know between start and end which are the key milestones that you would like to see. And then you will also know which is the critical path from start to end that you need to monitor very clearly. And you can do that with a tool called Gantt chart. Now, having said so, today we are going to learn about estimation. Okay, why do we need to do estimation? The reason is not all the time and cost of each and every task is known to you. Okay, so not all the time and cost will be known to you, and therefore you need to estimate the time and estimate the cost. And based on an estimation, you will budget, because as I mentioned to you, each day costs money depending on how small or big is your project. Each day you are hiring labor, hiring equipment, and therefore it costs you money. Because it's not known, therefore you need to estimate. And today we are going to learn some tools and techniques for estimation. So in this slide, you will see there are 5 commonly used tools for estimation, but today we are going to only talk about the 3-point estimation, because probably that's the one that you're going to use most, and that's a most objective way of doing normal projects. When we have time, or if some of you have time, maybe you study later, join a course like this, which is a full certificate course, you will be learning each of the other parameters. So what is a 3-point estimation and how we can learn that today and use that? 3-point estimation is basically, it can be used for both estimation of time and cost. So next week we are going to cover the cost management plan. The same estimation you will be using, or the same formulas you will be using for estimation of cost. But today we are going to do the estimation of the time. What it does is there are 3 scenarios which are assumed. The first scenario is a best case scenario. Everything goes clockwise, I should be able to finish this project in 6 months' time. Okay, so that's a best case scenario, denoted as O. The time O is a TO is best case scenario. Then we go to the worst case scenario. The worst case is that if everything goes wrong, my funds are stuck, my people are not there, I'm struggling with the I will be able to finish that in 12 months' time. So you have estimated 6 months is the best case, worst case is 12 months. And then you also sit down with your team or with the experts or do many other parametric calculations in which you say, but looks like I will not be able to finish in 6 months. I'll definitely not go till 12 months, but looks like in 10 months time, I'll be able to finish this project. So that will be called as the most likely. As a project manager and the project team, you will know what are the most likely number. Once you have the most likely number, you got three numbers. You got 6 months, you've got 12 months, and you've got 10 months. In a normal case, you will add the 3 and divide by 3 so that it's like an average which will be coming up. So 6 plus 10 divide 6 plus 10 plus 6 plus 10 plus 12 divided by 3. Okay, that will be the mean value. But that is not statistically a sound system to get accuracy. So there is a system which has been prevalent called PERT system, which is Project Evaluation and Review Technique, PERT, Project Evaluation and Review Technique. This PERT and CPM, many of you must have heard the word. You can Google search later and learn more about it. CPM is critical path method and PERT is a project evaluation and review technique. It's in vogue for probably 50 years now, and still people use it. It initially started during the World War time uh, because estimation was very important for logistics supply. All your planning when you're doing getting a war, you just can't go forward to fight when your estimation of logistic and supply do not reach in time. So in any other project also we continue to use the PERT formula, which is the time estimate or the estimated time is nothing but the optimistic time plus pessimistic time and add 4 times the most likely, then divide by 6. Now some of you must be thinking why a very odd calculation. It's not TO, TM and TP, but TO plus TP, but 4 times TM. And then instead of divided by 3, we divide by 6. Very simply explain this, that you are actually trying to use 3 scenarios, but if you use the middle scenario only once, that is it most likely only once, you're actually making an average and not giving the weightage of most likely higher, because it's towards the end it is most unlikely. The most optimistic and most pessimistic is most unlikely. Most likely or probability is always in the middle, which is the optimistic time. So we want to boost the optimistic time. So if we have done the optimistic time twice, then 2 of the optimistic time was almost equal to the 2 of the pessimistic and optimistic. So this 2 plus 2 is again averaging it out. So the researchers who created PERT method, they said, no, we want to boost it up more than the 2 extremes. That's why instead of 2, they made it 4. So in that case, you're really giving a good weightage to the 4, to the middle one, and therefore even the two side ones are extremes are actually nullified. You will still get the final number, which will be very close to the middle one. But the good news is that because then now there are 4 plus 1 plus 1, there are 6 parameters that you have taken. You have to divide by 6 to arrive at the most probable time estimate. So I want you to spend not 1 minute, maybe half a minute to read the slide and understand. Otherwise, during question answer, you can ask me if you've not understood anything. So this is the formula you're going to use for every single task in your project. Okay, and then create an estimated time. Okay, and next class, again, we are going to do costing. So instead of T, it will be C. So optimistic cost, pessimistic cost divide, and 4 times the most likely cost divided by 6 is going to be your estimated cost. So is that clear? I've given a link at the bottom, YouTube link, so you can actually read more of that. Sorry, you can, yeah, this is the YouTube link. So you can see this at your leisure and you can learn more about it. Okay, so now that we have got a tool or a formula, we should be able to use this formula to estimate the tasks. Now, a typical project will look like this. Typical project will look like this, the task 1, task 2, task 3. So in this case, there are how many tasks? There are 13 tasks. And when you complete all the 13 tasks, your project is complete. Okay. So what you're going to do is you're going to estimate through that formula what is the duration of task 1. Again, you will use the same formula to have the duration of task 2, task 3, task 4. So that way you will have, say, here 2 days, here 5 days, maybe here 1 month, maybe here 2 months. And then you know from start to finish what should be the project duration, which is most probable, and that's how you're going to uh, tender for. For example, you're bidding for a project or you're asking for money or time from your sponsors, you will use this formula to estimate the time. So what we have learned now, how to convert tasks into task to time. Now, the bad news here is the tasks are not sequential. We don't finish task 1, then go to task 2. We don't finish task 2, then go to task 4. We don't finish task 4 to task 5. You will see the task 2 and 3 are parallel. Okay. Similarly, task 11 and 12 are parallel. Task 6 and 7 are parallel. Now, how does that happen? How do you get these tasks which are parallel? Who decides about this? So you as a project manager will decide on which will be parallel and which will be sequential based on some methods. So I will show you the methods in the next chart. So that is called scheduling. Okay, so you're now scheduling all the tasks either parallel or sequential. Now, when you schedule these tasks, what you do is basically use a big board and sticky notes, and each of the sticky notes that you see here is basically a task. So you can see task 1, task 2, task 3. You write the task in a sticky note and then stick in the wall as the starting point. Because at this point in time, you've only estimated the duration. And what you have done is you have named the task. For example, the first task could be contact sponsor. The second task will be get approval from sponsor. Third task will be uh, buy some material. Fourth task could be hire some labor. Okay, so each of this will need time. You can't hire a labor one day. You have to put an advertisement, or you need to go to some other bosses and say, I need 5 people. So it'll take some time. So you have estimated those time. And in the sticky note for scheduling, you have written the name of the task. Say hiring or recruitment is a task. And you say recruitment for all the project people will take you 7 days. So in the sticky notes, you've got task and the duration for these tasks. Clear? So I'm repeating. Scheduling starts with sticky notes in a wall. Each of the sticky note is a task. Each of the task will have the name of the task and the duration of the task at this point of time. Now that you've done that, you will probably, it will look like this. You will do it not alone, but you will do it with your team. So someone will be writing and someone will be sticking that in a large wall, and all that you have done at the end, each and every task which is after breaking down of the whole project will look like this, which is just stuck over there without a process, a logic, or a flow. So now you need to bring the right flow, that which task is first and which task is second. For that, I'm introducing two concepts to you. One is called dependencies, the other one called constraints. What does it mean? Dependencies mean each task is dependent or independent of the other task. For example, the first task is probably not dependent on any previous task because that's the beginning. Okay, but the second task is dependent on the first task. or maybe the third task is dependent on the second task or the first task. So dependencies are very important for you to establish as a team. So you will brainstorm with a team, or you will do it alone for small projects, and you see which are the dependencies for each of the tasks. Another example, you are going from Bangalore to Delhi. And after you go to Delhi, then you will go and check into a hotel. And then after checking to the hotel, you will refresh yourself and then go for a official meeting. Okay, so there are three tasks. One is taking a flight from Bangalore, task one. Second one is from Bangalore airport, take a taxi to the hotel. Third is checking in. Fourth is getting refreshed. Fifth is taking another cab. And the sixth is going to the meeting. Okay, so that's one flow of activities. So you can see the task called check-in to a hotel is depending on completion of the previous task called flight from Bangalore to Delhi. If the flight from Bangalore to Delhi is delayed, your check-in will be delayed. If the flight from Bangalore to Delhi is cancelled, you will not check into the hotel. That task will be incomplete. So check-in to the hotel being a task is dependent on a previous task called taking a flight. So that's called dependencies. So you will establish these dependencies. Then what are the constraints? Each task operate within certain constraints. What are those constraints? We'll see later. Okay. But at this point of time, I'm introducing two concepts called dependency in scheduling of tasks and constraints of each task, which we need to know to be able to do scheduling of a project and its task. So what is dependencies? So you will write in the same sticky notes. Previously, what you've got in the sticky note, name of the task and the duration. Now you're going to add something more in each of the tasks. What are the dependencies? Now, what are the dependencies? There are two concepts within dependencies. One is called the predecessor and successor identification. So you need to identify who has to be finished or completed or started or or what is that finished before this task can be even taken up. So for that, you can see this green patch where you can say install of the web server is dependent on the install of the operating system. Suppose the task is to update an operating system from Windows 10. You have been asked that update 30 computers in your office from Windows 10 to Windows 11. So first you will have to install the operating system, and then you can go to the web server, and after that probably you can do the rest of the tasks, which are configure and then add pages. Okay, so in this case, when you're talking about the sticky note called install web server, you will write the predecessor of the task is install OS, and the successor of this task is configure web server. You will not write that add pages from designer. It's just immediate predecessor and immediate successor. Clear? Just give me a minute. Yeah. So now there are four type of dependencies. First one is called finish to start. Now, what are the dependencies? Remember, these are task dependencies. So finish to start means the predecessor has to finish for the successor to start. That means installing OS has to finish for the successor to start. Okay. Similarly, there will be start to start. Two activities need to start for only for that. For example, two friends are going from Bangalore to Delhi. Your friend has, and both, it's important that both of you reach for the meeting. So you need to have both of them start their journey from the home in Bangalore. Only then the project starts. Otherwise, you reaching the airport without the other person starting event from their house, it's not going to help you. So that's a start to start relationship. Okay. Now the third one is finish to finish. That means predecessor has to finish for the successor to finish. That means no matter when you start, but you won't be able to finish without the previous person or the predecessor finishing the task. You have to finish both together. Okay. And the fourth relationship is start to finish. Something has to start. That means the predecessor has to at least start for you to finish the project. So these are the four type of dependencies. Now what you will do is that you will evaluate each task and identify what type of dependency they are. It is not only the dependency, but what type of dependency, because the sticky notes or the flow will accordingly be sequential, parallel, up and down. When you actually do, in our class, it's a 1 month course, as I told you. We actually practice this in a class in which the team does it. So you can practice within the same cohort that you are here, or you can practice that in your office or with some other friends. But you will see all these will come alive when you start applying the dependencies, each task and the dependencies based on predecessor and successor. Now, once we have learned that, you will probably able to get into some kind of a diagram like this, which is called network diagram. It is very important that you know what is a network diagram, how it is to be developed, because in the project management, people will ask you most of the time, these are basic and fundamentals, that have you got a network diagram? Can you send it to me? Okay, if you're not got a network diagram, can you quickly do a network diagram? So this is called a network diagram, where start to finish, these are like sticky notes. Uh, and then you will see there are different tasks. Actually, there will be A, B, C, Ds there. And this is just an example for you to quickly understand, is that you start, there are two tasks to start with, same time, both will take 1 days. The task on top after that will go to another task which will take 2 days, and then after this path gets over. Okay, say for example, the construction of a building or a house, this could be the path for electrical installations. Then there is another path which could start after 1 day, then you get 2 days of work here, another task 2 days and finish. So this could be the construction activity, right? Maybe 2 months instead of 2 days, and 1 month instead of 1 days. So what happens is, through the dependencies, understanding of the dependencies of the task, relationship between two tasks, you will be able to arrange the sticky notes to have a network diagram like this, which shows how the tasks progresses from start to finish. Now, the next I will introduce is the constraint. Now, constraints, remember, these are constraints of each task. Okay, so in the sticky note, you will write for each of the tasks also the constraints. So how many bullet points are there in the task? First one is the name of the task. Second one is the duration of the task. Third one is the dependencies of the task, with who is the predecessor and who is the successor. And third one, you're writing here the constraint, which is a start to finish constraints. Now, what are these start to finish constraints? There are 8 of them. So you will apply any one of them in this, or either or is possible. For example, what are the 8? This task needs to be started and finished as soon as possible, ASAP. Okay, that's a constraint. This task should be finished or started as late as possible. This start should finish no later than 1st of March 2022. Okay, this task should finish no later than. sorry, no earlier than, and here it is no later than. Must finish. You will say, no, there is no earlier. It must finish. If 20, if 15th of August is the function, it must finish no later than 15th of August. Okay. So sometimes there is a hard stop. So you will put that as a constraint here. Must finish on, or it must start, because if I, for example, your boss may say, if it doesn't start in this financial year, I will not get the money from this financial year. So it must start on, say, 1st of June to show at least 1 month of this year we have started. Therefore, the project could be deemed as this year's project. Otherwise, the budget lapses. Then you go to the next year. Okay, so must start on. The seventh one is start no later than. Okay, it can start earlier, but no later than. So that means you're going to catch the flight in Bangalore. You know your flight is at 10 o'clock. You know that you need at least 1 hour before closing of the gates and everything else. But ideally, you should be there 2 hours earlier, and maybe with COVID, 2.5 hours or 3 hours. So then, therefore, you say that, look, for a 10 o'clock flight, I can start at 7, 8, 9, but it says no later than 9 o'clock, because at 9 o'clock the check-in will close, the backdrops will close. Okay, no later than. And start no earlier than. There's no point starting earlier, because wherever you're going, the office will, suppose you're going for a meeting, it's first thing in the morning, say 9 o'clock is your meeting. If it was 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you could have gone there at 1 o'clock and waited. But for a 9 o'clock, the office only opens at 9 o'clock. So there's no point starting earlier than, say, whatever, 8 o'clock, and making sure that you reach there just a little bit earlier than 9, because you don't have much flexibility to, to start earlier. So these are the different scenarios which you will face. Use each of the scenarios along with your project team, along with your expert, your consultant, your friends, whoever is a project stakeholder, and write those constraints in that task sticky note. So I'm repeating now. What you have done now is that you've got several of these tasks, and it gives you the name, dependencies, and constraints. Okay, and the duration. Now that we have learned this technique, it becomes easier for you to now do the scheduling. How do you do that? It will look like a board where all these tasks are there. Now you start arranging based on the predecessor and successor. The one which will have no predecessor is always the start. So look at all these one and see which one doesn't have a predecessor. That will be the starting. So first you put it that pick up the sticky note, put extreme left. Now again you look for a task which doesn't have a successor. That means that the project is finished, because there's nothing after that. Okay. Now the bad news is it's not that easy, because there are many projects, many tasks which may not have a successor, but it is still not the finish of the project, because there are many of these tasks will end, but the project hasn't ended. So therefore, all of them you will put on the extreme right hand side, and then start shifting some of them left, and the one which is left at the end will be your finish point. Now that you have got this, then you have to look for, again, go back to the start and see, okay, for the start, there is a successor written. So look for that slip where the successor becomes the predecessor. Okay, so with that, you should be able to arrange these sticky notes in a sequence which will give you something like this, a network diagram. Okay, now this network diagram is the starting point of the critical path. Now how that happens, for example, in this example, you have put all these sticky notes, which shows sticky note 1, sticky note 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And finally, this seems to be the arrangement. Then what you do is you see by traveling through which part. There's a path here. Path 1 is A, D, H, J to finish at 8. So that's path 1 from start to end. Task A, which takes 1 day, 1 day. Task D, which takes 4 days. Then task H, which takes 6 days. Task J, which takes 3 days. You add all these and then you reach here, and that will show 14 days, because 1 plus 4 plus 6 plus 3 is 14 days. Another route is this red one, that is BEHJ, and when you add it becomes 16 days. The another one is CGI and J, which is 14 days. Another one is BFJ, which is 9 days. So you will see it's all written here. So basically what you have done is, after you've arranged these tasks rightly based on the constraints and based on the dependencies, you get a network diagram like this. In the network diagram, the longest path is always the critical path. The longest part in this case is 16 days. You can see the 16 days here. So 16 days has come from the path 2, which is B, E, H, and J. Now what it says is that as a project manager, whatever the name of the task B, name of the task E, name of the task H and J, you will focus very, very actively and all the time, because if any of these activity gets delayed, for example, if the E gets delayed by, instead of 5 days, it becomes 10 days, the whole project instead of 16 days, the whole project adds 5 more days. So it'll finish after 21 days. So you've bursted the project in terms of the timeline, which is very bad for a project manager. Whereas if you see this ADHJ, the top one, path 1, is 14 days, but the project is getting over in 16 days. So you got 2 days somewhere. Okay, I'm not getting to details now, but at least you have 2 days. You can delay some activity by 2 days without delaying, and obviously that activity has to be between A, D, and H, because if J gets delayed by 2 days, that means J is a red one. I've showed you J is a critical path, so therefore J will be, the whole project will get delayed. Similarly, in the H is also in the critical path. If H gets delayed by 2 days, the total project will get delayed by 2 days. Therefore, your only option is to look at D and A. So that means looks like D and A, you can get delayed by 2 days. Okay, so that's how you look and see where there is a float or a slack available, that you can give it to a junior, whereas the red ones, which are critical, you won't give it to a junior, you will keep it to yourself to deliver that. So now we have learned the critical path. So remember, the critical path is the path which is the longest path to complete a project from start to finish. And how did we arrive that? We arrived that by estimating the tasks, arranging tasks through dependencies, arranging tasks with the constraints that we have identified, and we have come to the critical path. Now that we have done that, I'll show you a quick example before I finish today. This example is that I'm planning to travel from Brisbane to Sydney, and I'm going there to have some holiday on the weekend and to do some shopping in Sydney. Okay, so I have written down that my task is, first I'll pick up a car which is from my car hire location. Okay, and it'll take me 2 hours. And what I have written there, that the constraint here, I put that it is as soon as possible, because this is the critical path. So I won't like to delay, so as soon as possible. Now that I picked up the car, I start driving towards Sydney. I know it will take 15 hours to drive from Brisbane to Sydney. Predecessor of the task 2 is 1. That means predecessor of task 2 is the pickup of the car. If pickup of the car is not completed, I cannot start driving. So there is a dependency, and the predecessor is 1. And what is the type of the dependency? It is finish to start. That means the predecessor has to finish for me to start the next task. That means finish the pickup car, then only I can start driving. So therefore, I've written FS, which is the dependency. And constraint, my driving must finish on the hotel check-in time. So when I reach Sydney, suppose I reach at 8 o'clock in the morning, uh, but my check-in time is 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They will not allow me to check in because they will probably give 12 o'clock to the previous guest to vacate. They'll take 2 hours to clean, and therefore 2 p.m. is the check-in on most of the hotels. So here I'm saying it must finish on the check-in time because that's the latest I can. That's the latest I can, reach late. But anything more than that, if I instead of 2, if I go and check in at 4, that means my shopping is impacted. My next activity like sightseeing is impacted. Okay, so that's why I've said here constraint might be must finish. Then I have checked into the hotel. The next is the visit tour locations in Sydney. It will take 13 hours. Dependency is task 2, that means arrival or driving to Sydney. And then there are some constraint like start no later than hotel check-in, no earlier than hotel check-in time, and start no later than the hotel checkout time. Okay, so this is an example of how you will be writing the task, the durations, the predecessors, the dependencies, the type of dependencies, and the type of constraints. And if you do that, then you will be able to draw a network diagram like this. And what the network diagram does is basically not only identify the critical path, it gives you a plan of the sequence of the tasks, sequence of the activities to arrive at the project timeline or project duration. Okay, so this is the heart of the time management plan. So what we have learned today is basically in the time management, and you can do an activity for the project that you have in hand. First try and use that formula, PERT formula, to estimate duration of various tasks. Then prepare the relationship between the tasks, that means dependencies and the constraints, and then determine the critical path. If you do that, then you will be able to achieve the project duration or the timeline, the project schedule, the project's critical path, and you will therefore know what to plan and manage in terms of tasks. So what we have learned today is 2 parts of the constraint management. Remember last week I talked about constraints are time, cost, scope, and quality are constraints because you work with the limitation or the constraints of cost in a project. You work with the limitation of time in a project. You work with the limitation of the quality in a project. You work with the limitation of deliverables in a project. In that case, we have covered 2 of the 4. Last week we have done scope, which is a constraint. Today we have done time as a constraint. Next week we are going to do cost as a constraint, and next to next we are going to do quality as a constraint. So constraint management, half we have covered. If you practice this, you will be able to schedule any project. So how to schedule a project? First you estimate, then create the dependencies and the constraints, then do the critical path, and then you arrive at the total duration. So with this, I will go in for the question answer now, and I'm quite happy to repeat if you have questions. But this is a skill, this is not just theory, you need to practice this. If you practice this as a skill, you're very good as a project manager, and this Any project you do, any project anywhere in the world, small, big, large, complex, you need to do the scheduling, critical path identification, and the duration. So that's what we covered today.
Thank you, Dr. Partha. I think it was quite comprehensive. Some of the things that you covered, I know you, in fact, even the practicing the whole exercise of using sticky note and working out dependencies is obviously a very comprehensive exercise, but very an exercise which obviously really transforms your understanding as well. But I know within time constraints, you've done your best, and I think it would have really done the spark off for everyone attending as well. And I'm sure they'll be able to augment that with further reference to this video as well. So I'll stop this video and then start the Q&A session if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.